you realize that the world actually, there's a level which is not to do with talent, it's to do with the, let us assume that you've got a whole bunch of people of equal talent, I'll put it that way. The difference in your success or otherwise is going to be to do with your personal charisma or charm and your ability to socialize and network. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing for an awful lot of people, because I know a lot of very talented people who are rubbish. They're almost sociopathic in their inability to get on with people, but they're very talented.
Yes.
So I discovered the sort of that charm was a degree of important thing. And the other thing I discovered was something which I'm really glad I discovered young, which is the importance of trust. And my then wife was an unbelievably straight and honest woman. So when we were dealing with record deals, she insisted that I photocopied the contracts and handed them to the boss of Abbey Road Studios, the sound engineer, every musician, so they could see what we were actually getting, so that what we had offered them as a stake, they could have it accounted. Yes. And this started a lifelong desire to actually be very transparent. Not out of some kind of moral compass, but actually everybody relaxes around you when they know exactly where they are. You know, they're very, very comfortable. And I've noticed as well, when in business in later life you have a moment where things are tight. You know what? Most people you owe money to, if you dare to phone them up and say things are tight, or write them a note and say things are tight and this is how it's going to be, most people are really cool. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. The thing people hate is the idea that someone's keeping you in the dark, you know, like some mushroom. And so I would say that's one of the most valuable life lessons that I had, which is just be straight. Just be straight.
Seems that was a lesson learned pretty early on, at a time when most younger people were in the business of making records. They were at that time particularly sort of also in the business of, you know, throwing TVs out of hotel windows and idealizing the sort of irresponsible lifestyle. It sounds as though at an early stage you were looking at all the different aspects of this business and the events and all of this side of thing, and getting slightly more from it in addition to all of the focus on the music. Is that fair to say, or am I just...
No, I think that's right. I think there is another thing which is even less romantic than what you just said, which is that two things happened to me. I got married in 1978 and had been going out with my then wife since 76. So I suddenly became very married, and I'd stopped being interested in girls, which is one thing. But the other thing I realized was that a lot of what I had a romantic notion about within music, so I adored music, I had a huge record collection, was that when you become a professional in that business and you go on tour to Germany or whatever, Holland, and you're in town and there's another band, I'd always thought that the world was full of people who just kind of hung out with each other. I hadn't realized these were basically business units with a manager and everything else. They wanted to keep the people away from other people. The very opposite of what I thought was the romantic music industry was what was true. So nowadays, when you see supergroups and really cool people coming together, that wasn't a bloody social thing, a bunch of mates. That was organized for a film opportunity to do this, to do that, and what have you. And mostly you're dealing with business tribes that are trying to create a marketing position to make themselves seem distinct to everybody else. And that actually killed a lot of my love of the music industry. I actually found that the music that I'd enjoyed being at university with all the musicians in the university all playing together or whatever, because we thought that's how the music business was, and isn't that cool? And when you then discover it's not like that at all. And also this thing about throwing TVs out the window. Okay, you had the odd, you know, mad guy like Keith Moon, and everybody tells you Keith Moon's, you know, legendary story. They're really rather sweaty gym shoe journalists who revel in telling stories about, wow, it's like sub-sixth form. And actually, when you look at bands like the Stones or whatever, yeah, they were serious on their physical fitness. In fact, there's to a degree, there is a massive con going on where the bands are trying to make themselves seem wild for their brand. But, you know, whether it be Kiss or Motley Crue or whatever, they may one of them or whatever may have had a bit of a drug problem, but the rest were sure as hell wanting to do the business, you know, and they did all the stuff as a professional, being professionally maverick, so to speak.
Yes.
And it actually suddenly felt very sixth form to me. A lot of it was really childish, and was done for effect. And there's actually something a bit sad about grown men doing things not because they're really out of it or wild or whatever, but because, hey, if we throw television through it, people get in the news. Well, great, grow up.
Yeah. Let's move on from the music business, even though I know that there's more detail about what worked in there from a business point of view. But from there, you ended up moving to Cornwall.
Moved to Cornwall in 87. December the 17th. I was on holiday and I went into an estate agent because it was raining. I saw a house that was for sale and I just took the pamphlet. Wasn't really interested, but it rained the next day. So we got in a car, we drove out there. The tractor pulled across the road. It was pouring with rain. The tractor driver got out in his sou'wester and I wound the window down. He said, "What are you doing here, old buck?" And I said, "It's really embarrassing. I was coming over a sneak look at this house." And he said, "It happens to be my house. Do you want to come have a cup of tea?"
Oh.
And 48 hours later, we bought the house,
Right.
and which is ridiculous because I lived in Brixton.
Yes.
But I had decided to lead my life in a fairly chaotic way by then. I decided that I positively wanted to lead my life by my instincts and not be policed in any way by a process of career development or something. I just had a sense that by trusting my instincts, something very interesting would come up.
That is interesting. That is the exact opposite, I suppose, of most of the life advice that younger people get. They say, if you're going to aim high, you've got to know where you're going and all of those sorts of things. And obviously, those principles work very well for some people who end up with a career path and go further and faster than perhaps they would have done. But it's an interesting alternative take because at least this way, pretty much guarantee you're going to end up in places you never imagined and would never have aimed for.
No, absolutely. But I think an awful lot of people who give other people advice are rubbish. They're absolutely rubbish. And they're rubbish because they feel a sense of guilt about giving the advice they might actually genuinely wish they'd been given themselves. So they keep on continuing giving the advice that their parents gave them because it's sensible and no one's going to shoot you. It's a bit like no one got fired for buying IBM. You've got to have a target. You've got to do this. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to work hard. What they don't say is read books, read more books, talk to lots of people. Just imagine you die and you go to heaven with only the people you currently know. How dull is it going to be? There is such a lot of rubbish talked. It's just the same rubbish is spouted out about education.
Yes.
You got to do maths. And why? Why have you got to do maths? Every parent says you've got to do maths, you've got to do English. They don't say you've got to do dancing or you've got to do music or you've got to do art. Actually, those three will make you happy. Maths very rarely made anyone happy. But if you also want to do maths, that's fine.
Yes. So you must have had some advice that turned out to be useful. What's the best advice you have had that actually was worth having?
I guess the best advice I've had is lose your fear of being disliked. It is the biggest brake on your success.
Yes.
And that's absolutely right. I think most people are crippled by being unable to distinguish between the right course of action and the course of action that will cause least offence. And it doesn't mean being a bastard. It doesn't mean that at all. I just think that an awful lot of people waste an awful lot of time because they don't say what they actually mean.
Yeah.
I now tell people I can be horribly rude, but I am rude with a smile on my face. But what I'm trying to tell people is don't waste my life with your life. Don't tell me we have to have a 3-hour meeting. It's an important matter.
Yes.
Don't be shy of the fact that you're clever. The most crucifying thing is that most of the people that you're dealing with are going to be clever. But it is so rude to say that you're clever. So everybody has to pretend that they are not clever. So we have to allocate 3 hours to a meeting that actually I could have in 10 minutes.
Yes.
Because no one dares say, I know it's a lot of money and I know it's a really big decision, but it's very easy to know what the decision is. Can we just do it now? And then have 2.5 hours back. People waste their lives away with crummy ideas. It's just like organizational charts. I know I'm the chairman of International, but these very masculine industrial revolution based mechanistic, you have a chief executive and then a line to the weighing the scales of authority off which drip other executives and then the grapes of staff underneath them. Yeah. All in the pretense that you're in charge in some way. There is organization. Nothing in nature is like that. You don't find termites like that. Sheep don't operate like that. Monkeys don't operate like that. It's about gangs. Yeah. It's about hunting in packs. And we do everything possible to create organizations that are unnatural, that do not recognize that we are creaturely. I used to get criticised when I'd take my senior team to the same place. We'd go to China or something, a meeting. This is so wasteful. Why are you taking everybody? And I say, it's wasteful, is it? All my senior team have looked in the eyes of the people we're going to do business with. So when we say, should we do business? They all go, yup, 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 yup. I could have gone on my own, come back. We'd have a committee meeting. We talk about it. We send someone else out. They then come back. We write a report. By that time, we lost the will to live. And we prefer to drill our teeth without anaesthetic. And you save a fortune by being like that.
Yes, yes. So you mentioned nature, which is apposite of this point in the story, because it's not the normal thing that next happens after you've just decided that maybe the music business isn't for you, that you're going to go and seek to reclaim a lost garden.
That's not what happened.
Okay, what happened?
That's not what happened. I went. If this is being a true story as opposed to the romantic version.
Yeah, let's have the true version.
No, the true version is I bought a farm with a barn. I spent all the money I'd made in the music industry doing up the house and the barn, and I was then pretty much skinned. The only thing that saved me was the royalties from a record I'd written as a joke called The Fishing Song, which went on a Jack Charlton TV programme called Go Fishing, and that saved me from bankruptcy. But I didn't know what to do, and I suddenly I was in my mid-30s, suddenly having a crisis of what shall I do with the rest of my life? At that point, a chap I'd recently got to know turned up one day with a pig. He turned up with a pig and he said, you need a pig because you've got a garage and your car isn't nearly good enough to be worthy of that garage. So why don't we put the pig in the garage, and I need a home for my pig.
That's not a normal conversation that you have with people, to be fair.
It isn't. But the pig was called Horace. And Horace and I became great mates. And then Horace became lonely. So I found him Doris. And Horace and Doris then made beautiful music. And they had babies. And when they had babies, I thought it was such a fantastic thing. I decided this was a sign from above that I was meant to run a rare breed park. That's what my future was going to be.
Right, I see.
So I went to find some land to build a rare breed park on. I found some land. I met the guy. He told me instantly I couldn't have it, but he'd also given me a very hot cup of coffee. So we had to make small talk. And I told him that I'd once been an archaeologist, and he then uttered the immortal words, which I've never heard before or since: I have need of an archaeologist. And he said, I have just inherited an estate right next door to where we're standing, which has been derelict since 1915, and I've got no money, but I'm told there was once a famous garden in there. Would you like to visit it with me? So the following day, I cut my way in, fell in love, and that's changed my life. I ended up taking a lease on the estate and decided to restore it. But the remarkable thing there, if remarkable is the right word, is that I knew nothing about plants at all.
No.
Nothing.
What did you fall in love with? Did you fall in love with sort of this vision of nature that it was and could become, or was it the project? That it was a project that was starting from so far back, and yet you could see how this could turn into something extraordinary.
I'm not sure it's possible to be honest with the passage of time, because you rewrite your history backwards, don't you? But I would say the first thing was an immense sense of romance. To actually see a stage on which humans had lived their lives, but completely buried underneath, bramble and ivy and fallen trees, and then self-sown trees that had completely obliterated the landscape that you were looking at. It's very romantic. And I genuinely had a vision of a kind of sleeping beauty sort of thing. And I've always been fascinated by the notion of kissing frogs, the idea that you can create princesses or princes by kissing a frog. And for me, it was a fairy tale thing. And I thought, I'm just going to lift the veil. And I was really lucky that I had, as a partner in doing the work, the guy who was actually had just completed the restoration of my farmhouse, a builder called John Nelson, who was looking for something meaningful. And this brought together all of his life skills. He'd been a heritage builder, a proper builder, built it for Wimpy's, but he knew all about cobbling and old school joinery and all these things. And we just went at it, hammer and tongs. But we had no sense of opening it to the public or it being a business. It became the closest I can align it to is the movie Fitzcarraldo, about the guy who wanted to build an opera house up the Amazon and us. And I don't know whether you've seen it, Fitzcarraldo.
I've seen reviews of that. Yeah.
It's one of the great movies. It's pointless, magnificent. And I suddenly realised that the electricity that comes, the charisma that comes from a great adventure, like Don Quixote. You have, as we started, people just started to come out of the woodwork and came and volunteered and worked with us. And at a certain point, it never occurred to us we weren't going to restore it. We didn't have the money to do it, but we, like Mr. Pickwick, Mr. McCorby in the Pickwick paper, we had this thing that something will turn up.
Yes.
And it did. It just did. And we got this gang of people around us, and then we persuaded the BBC to do a documentary, and the documentary was fantastic. It won the award for Best Documentary of the Year. And it was perfect, except that it forgot to mention we weren't open to the public at the end of it. So the public poured in. One of my builders had to unscrew the portaloo so he could stand there selling Woolworths cloakroom tickets. And so people were paying to come in, and then they'd say, "What's up there?" You say, "No idea. Here's a machete. Why don't you go find it?" So we had the public come and do the work as well. So it was marvellous. We opened Good Friday 1992.
Right.
But we opened only because the public started to come.
Yes.
We had a goat shed where we charged people eventually. When we went proper from the Portaloo, we went to the goat shed, and we had an urn in which we made tea. People could have a mug of tea, and then we'd wash it out and whatever. So the goat shed was our cafe for the first year. But it's great because the whole brand of Heligan is just built on that continuously. Everything you see is about great values. I mean, most of the marvellous stuff that would have cost millions to do, actually with donations from people who had things in their garages, people who had salvaged ironwork from some great glass house and put it in the garage because one day it might come useful. It's amazing. Stuff was all came to us. It was a real sense that Heligan was the people's garden, because we're the only place that told the story of the ordinary men and women who made gardens great, rather than the story of lords and ladies.
Yes,
and of course, that was the distinction.
These ordinary men and women included the men who were the original gardeners, who, of course, many of whom didn't come back from the war. So.
That's right, which gave it a great pathos. I mean, we found the names of those who'd worked there written in pencil on the plaster of the thunderbox room, the toilet. And it was finding that, and then finding the names. The next time you see most of those names is on the war memorials at St. Hugh, Mevagissey, and Goran. And it was finding that kind of motivated us to tell the whole opera. And everybody said we were mad. But I'd already bought into the idea that I don't actually care what other people think, and other people's opinion meant nothing to me. I just knew that one of the things the music business taught me, which is important, is that if you love something, really love something, and you are not a freak, there will be millions and millions and millions of people who feel the same way. So just tell it like you feel it, and it'll be fine. And that's been true for me. It's now been 37. That's how I've lived my life, and it's absolutely bang on. Most people just don't have enough. Don't have enough confidence in their own love of things. Believe me, if you love something, other people will.